Welcome to the Art of Being Nimble podcast. I'm Glenn Smith and I'm your host. In this series, we'll introduce you to business leaders from around the world who will on interview about how they've overcome challenges of operating a business in today's dynamic world. Through their stories, we're going to hear about what problems they've had and how they fixed them and the benefits it's brought them. Importantly, you're going to learn some lessons about what you can then use in your organisation to do similar things. So let's get on with the show and hear the next story. Today, on The Art of Being Nimble, I welcome Helen Gracie, a lead business analyst at the Money and Pensions Service. Her career has concentrated on delivering transformational change across public, private and charitable sectors. Helen's superpower is connecting quantitative and qualitative data to design processes that promote meaningful change. With a career spanning high-stakes environments such as the Ministry of Justice and the Home Office, Helen has a track record of translating complex user needs into services that generally make a difference, even when those services are more needed than wanted. Helen is also a passionate advocate for mental health and for improving equality, diversity and inclusion, which she integrates into both her professional and personal life. She has chaired charities, led cross-disciplinary collaborations and championed user-centric approaches, all while focusing on delivering outcomes that benefit society as a whole. In this episode, we'll explore the complexities of delivering public services that people may not want but need. Helen will share her insights on understanding user needs, driving adoption and aligning those services with broader goals for UK PLC. Get ready for an engaging conversation with someone who really knows how to navigate the exciting intersection of user research, policy and impact. Hey Helen, welcome to the podcast. So let's start off with thinking about public services, because a lot of our listeners are going to be in the business world, but what does the public sector, or why is the public sector different to business?
What I find really interesting about working in the public sector is your users are people who have to be there, whether they want to be there or not. People have to access certain public services. When you're a brand in a business, you're all about trying to entice customers and you're trying to be more exciting and shiny than your competitors. But public services don't necessarily have competitors. They're just there because they have to be there and people have to use them, which comes with a whole different set of problems, which are mirrored in business, but are unique also to public sector.
So that's this quite monopolistic in its nature then, because like you say, they have to be there. As we're recording this, in the UK, this is tax season, and I've just done my tax return. So, yes, so there's a service that I had to use, whether I like to or not.
Exactly, and we do them every day, whether it's paying your council tax or ordering your garden bin if you're in a council that makes you pay for your garden bin, or finding a school place for your child, even making a doctor's appointment. These are all things that are part of our everyday lives that we're all interacting with every day. But I don't get to choose, and think, oh, yeah, no, I think I've got tonsillitis. Which GP should I see today? You're just frantically trying to get an appointment, or you're not shopping around for who's going to pick up your bins. This is the people who do it. Have they picked up my bins? Yes, no, I've got a problem. Let's solve it. It's very different to, I want a new pair of jeans. I need a bank account. I'm shopping around. There's no choice. You're stuck in it. You're going to have to go through the process start to finish. If you're going to file your tax return, no matter how painful it is, you have to do it by this date. Yeah. And if you don't, there are consequences.
Absolutely. yeah, I've had all the reminders.
Yep, exactly. They're good at the reminders.
Yeah. So mindful that public sector or public services are there whether we want them or not. How does that make, if you're delivering good public services, how does a delivery service need to think differently then, with respect that they're not trying to encourage a commercial transaction to happen?
So I think for me, it comes down to you look at your user needs and requirements slightly differently. I'm a business analyst by trade, so I always come back to requirements. It's always my buzzword. But I think it's very different to, I want this because that's exciting, versus a really fundamental need of, I need to find a school place for my child, and I need to know how to do that. So the kind of baseline's very different. Also, there's often a lot more emotion involved, and negative emotion. If you think about it, your first child, you're finding them a school place. I keep coming back to that because I think a lot of people go through it. It's a really emotional process. You want to do the best for your child. It's scary. If they haven't been in childcare before school, you're parting with your child for the first time. You want to make sure they're at a good school. They're going to make nice friends. You don't want them to get bullied. You don't know what do Ofsted ratings mean. What's the difference between excellence and good? There's so much there, and it's a complete minefield. And ultimately, I think a lot of the time, you just want a grown-up to tell you what to do, kind of thing, or someone like, this is a hard choice, make it for me. So if I'm then faced with a whole lot of complicated forms that I don't understand, I've already started from a place of anxiety and worry and all those things. And then I can't self-serve because I don't understand it. I'm going to end up picking up the phone to the council, probably a bit angry and a bit frustrated. And it's going to be a phone call that then takes a lot of time. I think something we've got to remember is we are now living in a digital age. We are so used to self-serving. And this is only more so in younger generations like Gen Z. I expect to be able to Google something and find out an answer, like Google difference in Ofsted ratings, Google who picks up my bins. You know, if I've got a problem, I expect to be able to find a quick answer online. And if I can't find a quick answer, then I expect to be able to talk to someone online. And that's what we're getting more and more, is then the customer service channels and all of that. And I've got some interesting stats I'll talk about in a minute. But I think for me, it's all about thinking about that starting point for the user. If it's a service they have to use, they might not be happy about being there. Like paying your council tax, doing your tax return. No one's thrilled to do their tax return, but you know you've got to do it. So if you're already a bit annoyed about doing it, and then it's really hard to do it on your own and quickly, and you can't find the right form and you can't figure out how to submit it, then you're going to pick up the phone or try and contact someone, and you're probably not going to be happy about it. And what that means is, if you look at customer service channels, we know picking up the phone is a much more expensive cost to serve than self-serving online, or than even web chat and channels like that. Calling is the most expensive channel. So it's in everyone's interests to self-serve. It saves money down the line. But even then, if they're picking up the phone and you're expecting to, if that phone call is starting with a frustrated person, it takes a lot longer to get the information you need to help them. So then not only are you in an expensive channel, you're in an expensive channel that's going to take a lot longer to resolve a query. It's not as
efficient, is it? Yeah.
Exactly. So it just builds a whole lot of inefficiencies and makes services a lot more expensive to run, quite frankly.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, if it's anything like whenever I've had to ring, well, maybe anyone these days, but you ring them up and you talked about that emotion, particularly that negative emotion, because the frustration of having to use it in the first place and then not understanding and then it not working and then probably sitting in the queue for half an hour before you get to speak to them. That doesn't help either, does it?
Exactly.
I'm already in a bad place and now I've had to listen to whole music.
Yeah. But the knock-on costs of that to the organisation, whether it's public sector or private sector, you know, brands get this wrong as well and end up with customers in that area. But the impact of that is massive. I read a stat from a survey completed by Combox last year where 8 out of 10 customer service agents leave within a year. Ooh. And if you think about the cost of recruitment...
Yeah, absolutely.
And the fact that those are the frontline people of your brand, of your service, all of that. If people are that unhappy that 8 out of 10 are leaving within a year, that's not helping anything, quite frankly. That's not helping that customer interaction, that user interaction. That's, again, increasing costs. But the more frustrated the customers are before they reach someone to help them, the more likely that it's going to become a confrontational conversation. Whereas if... yes, people have to use these services. And I did once hear in a public sector someone say, the users don't have to enjoy it, they just have to do it. Or the mentality of like, well, maybe we actually don't want them to use this service, so if we make it really hard, they won't access it. That sort of attitude just costs everyone more money.
Yeah.
Let's be really frank about it. It upsets a lot of people. And it costs everyone a lot of emotional turmoil. And bottom line, it's going to affect everyone's bottom line and finances. Whereas if you actually focus on really streamlined user journeys, understanding people's needs, making them accessible, and leaning into the fact that everyone, well, not everyone, a lot of people prefer to self-serve when they can, it'll make your internal processes quicker and easier. You'll be able to handle a higher volume of interactions with your service, and you'll be able to deliver services at a lower cost.
So you've talked about the, identifying the need and being able to do this. If you think about it, in my mind, and I'm interested in your view, I can think of at least 3 different elements to the needs of delivering a public sector. So service. So you've got one, the citizens. So I know you and I need to, order a new bin or something. We've got policymakers, so I'm predominantly thinking, I suppose, more politicians rather than, government employees who obviously want to achieve a particular outcome for the municipality that they're, looking at. And then you've got those that are the employees who are trying to operate the service and make the world a better place on a day-to-day basis. So those 3 cohorts could have quite differing and potentially conflicting needs. So how do those challenges go into, when you're helping to deliver amazing services?
Well, it's interesting you say you think they've got differing needs, when I think often they're actual commonalities. I think if you think about it at a basic level, about a streamlined process will benefit all 3 of those user groups no end. If you are trying to access public service and you're getting punted around the internal process, and I think we've all experienced that of, oh no, that's not my job, let me refer you to so-and-so. That's not my job, let me refer you to so-and-so. That's due to an internal process. If someone has access to your organization, you should be able to, the citizens' need is to be able to get their problem resolved quickly. They want to be able to access the right person who can give them the right information at the right time, in the right way. And that's where you've got your accessibility and everything like that. And, if the employee needs is they want to be able to complete their task as quickly and efficiently as possible. So I think you've got to really think about internal systems. If your processes are over complex, it's going to impact the needs of all 3 of those parties. Of outcomes aren't going to be met, corporate political outcomes aren't going to be met, citizens' needs aren't going to be met, and employees are going to have a right or pain. And generally, the processes are made more complex by either having inadequate systems to support them. I think we've all witnessed a working place where there are manual workarounds because the system doesn't do what it should. We've seen those spreadsheets. You know the ones I mean.
Yeah.
The spreadsheets, the post-it notes, all of those things, because the system just isn't quite fit for purpose. Or a new system's been brought in and people haven't been trained properly on it and upskilled enough to use it. So all those underlying things, if you nail those, you're going to meet the user needs. So I think it's one of those that if you go to user need, if you think about applying for a passport, my user need is, I need a passport. I need to be able to provide the right information for me to get a passport. I need to know how long it's going to take me to get a passport, because if I'm booking a holiday or travel, business travel, whatever, I need to know how long it's going to take me to get that passport so I can line it up. What do I need to do? Do I need a photo? What does my photo need to look like? Can I take it myself? Can it be a selfie? How does this mean? Your user needs are things like that. Or it might be I'm visually impaired, so then my user needs are, how do I complete it? Is there a Braille form? Is there someone who can check my photo for me because I can't check myself? Those sorts of things. So those are your user needs there. The employee needs are, I need to receive an application that is complete so that I can approve, deny a passport. And I need to be able to, you've got the person checking the details and then the person creating the passport. If I need to then receive the data so I can put it into a printed document, and I need to know that the passport printing machine, I'm sure it's just a printer in an office, I don't know how passports are made, but they need to know that they're handing off to the right person. And from the politics point of view, they need to know how many passports are being generated. They need to know where are applicants coming from. They might need to know information like What are people's birth countries with the passports coming from? What are visas of turn? They might need some information like that to help guide policies and politics. But if you look at that end to end, that is all about, as a user, I want to be able to put my name in once, and that one data field of my name goes all the way through end to end. I put in my address and it goes end to end. If it's, I wrote it down on this bit of paper, put it in the post, I've gone to the post office has delivered it. Somebody's opened the post. They've taken that up to floor 3. Someone on floor 3's looked at it and gone, oh no, this person was born in South Africa. They're not a UK from birth. That needs to go to desk 7. That needs to, all of that is meeting no one's needs. But so if you think about those underlying processes, so I really think that for a lot of it, comes down to nailing your processes and getting them streamlined, and then you can actually meet everyone's needs universally. Because if everyone knows what they need to do when, then it comes back to that self-serve element in a way. But even people who aren't able to self-serve, they then have access to calls, whatever that they need, because they're not clogged up by people who are frustrated that they can't self-serve. It's actually available to people who need them.
So it's interesting you talked about process improvement. I suppose that's a tune close to my heart because it's what I do a lot of, but with organisations. But I suppose as you were talking, I was thinking about government organisations of old and private sector as well, for that matter, would traditionally give us users, citizens, forms in a format that was convenient for them to receive, rather than thinking about what was easy or convenient for me as the user of that. So how have you helped, or what needs to happen for people to move that mentality for how do we best serve the needs of the users to get the passports, but also to make sure that I get the right form and the right data, and that, the South African goes to desk 7.
Yeah, I think we need to stop and challenge a lot of these things. A lot of these things, as you mentioned, have evolved. And I think I've seen that kind of in that first round of digital transformation, we basically digitized paper processes. The process stayed the same. It just, instead of it being a bit of paper, it became a Word document or a PDF. And then over the last kind of 10, 15 years, we've actually gone, well, hang on a minute, these new digital systems mean digital ways of thinking. And as people are now working in agile ways and using software development life cycles and product thinking in the ways that they build processes as well, things are changing. But there's still a lot of, well, we collect that data because we always have. So a few years ago, I was working with Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Services. And one example there, in the Immigration and Asylum Tribunal, the application form was, I think, like 40 pages long. And we sat down and we worked with them, with the judges and with the lawyers, and said, well, what do you actually need to process the case? And we managed to get it down to like 10 pages.
Wow, so substantial, but a fraction
Massive.
of what it was.
Yeah, but like that reduction's huge. And I've probably got the exact numbers wrong there. There is a case study published publicly online. You can go and find the numbers. But it was a massive, massive reduction in application form. Because you're looking at it going, well, why are you asking that? Because if it might be that, well, we have to verify that at another stage in the process anyway. It's like, well, why don't you just ask it there? Why are you asking it up front and doubling up? So there's a lot of, and I think that's common across so many different services. Things like reporting a pothole. If you're driving down the street and there's a pothole in the street, you can report it to your council. And you should report it to your council so they go and fix it. What information do they actually need to know? And there are some councils that you log on and they're asking you for like, how big is the hole? Whereabout in the road is it? It's in the middle of the road? Is it at the side of the road? They're asking all this stuff. Or do they actually just need to know, well, where is it? And we'll send someone to check it. And that's for the council to decide. But it is a thing of like, well, actually, how much information do you need to know up front? And I think that applies across the bay. And there are so many services where you're collecting information because you've always collected it. And then if you actually follow that data down the line, it's like, well, you're collecting this data here, who's using it when? It's actually only collected because it gets printed out in that annual report that no one reads. Well, should we stop collecting it? Or because someone thought it was a great idea to get all the information up front, but actually we have to verify it down the line anyway. So let's do it there rather than duplicating efforts. It's visiting that process, and data plays a massive part in it. Getting that data journey, people often overlook the process of the data. You look at your people processes, which is absolutely right, and your system processes, but it's actually understanding, that bit of data that goes from your citizen through your service up reporting to politicians or whatever. What's that end-to-end journey? Do you need it? And there are things, like GDPR and all that tells us only collect what you need. And you can justify taking what you need. That's fine if you do actually need it. But if you're making it more onerous just for the sake of a pretty graph that no one actually looks at, that's a bit of easy streamlining.
Yeah.
That's quite a quick win.
Well, and there's a cost involved to everyone in collecting that data and storing it, particularly if you don't need it.
Absolutely.
And data in the modern world, with one of my other episodes, was chatting to someone about data, the quality of data, and some shocking examples in that episode about the people not owning the data and looking after it, because if you don't have good data in the future, as we start to apply AI over the top of it, which is coming, and there's been lots of announcements recently in the UK about AI in government services. If you don't have quality data and it's not the right data in the right format, it'd be no use to man the beast.
Exactly. Whereas if you use your data properly, there are ways that you can make journeys a lot easier. Thinking about your interactions with your council, if your council has some sort of account or something where they held your core data of your name and your address, and linked to that you can see your council tax and your bins and, I don't know, social care you're accessing with them or benefits or whatever. If you can see all your council services in one place, it means that rather than every time you phone say, I need to renew my parking permit, yes, let me take you through top to bottom. If they were holding onto your data in a sensible way and joining it up and thinking about single customer views and CRMs and all that kind of thing, which I expect is probably a different podcast episode and a different can of worms, but it's about quality data and maintaining it. And then you make a user's life, a citizen's life, much easier, because my interaction's quick and easy, because I can phone and go, it's me, account number, whatever, and I need this. Oh, and by the way, your bin's up for renewal. Do you want to do that? Oh, yeah. And actually, while I'm here, I'll X, Y, Z. Great. One transaction, I've nailed 3 things.
Yeah.
Or one interaction, I've nailed 3 transactions, versus phoning 3 different departments. Because, within the council, they all sit on different floors and they're different departments. But as a citizen interacting with my council, can't I just do it all at once? Do I have to phone 3 different phone numbers? Could I just do it in one place?
And I mean, as a citizen in the UK, and I obviously don't have the experience of international listeners, but the UK central government is getting better at that. I mean, obviously, we've got different agencies, and their data bases are often don't talk to each other, and there's some copies there. But at least things feel like you're dealing with one organisation, even though it's sub-departments and agencies. I don't know what your views were, but I mean, for me, at a local level, dealing with my local council for things does feel like I'm dealing with different companies depending on what I want to do. And even with, so, I use a simple example. I like to go for a walk after lunch. And so I'm forever reporting a pothole or a street light that's not working or something. Most of that goes to the same department. But for most things, there's 3 different ways of doing it, and it's and some of it requires me to log in and then enter all my details, which they've already got. So there doesn't seem to be that motivation. So I suppose I share that because I wanted to touch on the fact that from what you talked about, it feels like there's a lot of behaviour and attitude change within the delivery of the public service that needs to change. It's not just a technical delivery that needs to change.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of this comes down to funding. Central government have slightly deeper pockets. They do just have more funds available to them. And they have more central meeting places. They do cross paths more often. They collaborate a bit more. Local councils are on their own, to be fair. They've got devolved funding that has been drying up. Their funding's been getting less and less. And a lot of them, we've had the cases of local councils going bankrupt, which is terrifying. I don't fully understand what that means, to be honest, because they still have to deliver services. But the point is, they're in dire straits when it comes to funds. So I think there has been a movement to, if it's not an absolute legal obligation for them to provide it, they're pulling back on it. But what is happening is, because councils have isolated budgets, they've got a social care budget and they've got a transport budget. Their budgets are ring fenced, and they're very protective of them because they know that they're at risk. But what they're missing is that actually, if they work together holistically, there are so many more savings to be made that they could get a lot more bang for their buck, essentially, and save more money.
Absolutely.
But I think that kind of instinct to protect drying up funds has meant that, it's like, well, not my job. Go to someone else and spend someone else's budget on it. No, that's a pothole budget. That's a lighting budget. And even where it gets weirdly disjointed, like school place versus school transport being different teams. It's like, but hang on, you've given a school place to this child and you're obligated to find a way for that child to reach that school by a bus. Why aren't you sharing that information? Instead, you're relying on a user to phone you and tell you, which is more expensive. But again, I think they just don't have the bandwidth to get out of that kind of day-to-day treadmill. We all see it, and as consultants, our job is to help those people who are so stuck at the coalface doing the day-to-day grind that they don't have the time and capacity to take a step back and go, actually, hang on a minute, if we changed that, you would save a load of time. But yeah, attitude for sure. But I can see the reasoning behind the attitude. And I think it does come back to that cost saving. But it's also, you see it again in consultancy. It's one of those things of, yes, consultants cost a lot of money up front, but save money down the line. It's a thing of, well, actually, if you spent this much money fixing your processes and your data and your systems over the next 5-10 years, you're going to gain it back tenfold. But I think councils and political services run in political cycles. Even, they're not meant to, they're lifelong services, but ultimately they are. The decision makers at the top of local council, of your council, are the councillors who are elected every so many years. So, a lot of that, I think, comes into play. If they trying to get them to take a 5 or 10 year view when they're on a 4-year tenure, it's difficult to get someone brave enough, I guess, to stump up budget that goes way past their cycle, their political cycle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose that, you're right. It's that mix of short-term focus, but also, in essence, because there's been there's always cost pressures in government, even in the good times. And, and there's been, maybe 15 years of challenge. Well, it's probably more than that, but, dramatic cost challenges the last 15 years or so. But also, I think maybe it's that old way of thinking of people aren't looking at the big picture. Like you said, the school application and the school transport, because they're different departments, it's that sub-optimization. There's no systems level thinking. And I suppose I want to come back to what you started talking about earlier about that user journey. Do you see that as a way of driving those improvements to that process? Because, today you've got someone who, a department, teams that look after school placements. You've got a team that look after school transport, and the two probably are in different buildings because no one has ever thought about putting them next to each other physically. But if you think about it from a user's point of view, can that be used to drive those improvements? Because you're now looking through the lens of, what do I need to do? I need to get little Johnny to school safely.
I really think it can. And I really think if we lean into some of the statistics and things that we see coming out of the private sector and all over about people's preferred channels for doing things, like, we know Gen Z live online, 16 to 24-year-olds, that they want online interactions. They want to just do things where they are. If they've got to contact someone, they want to be able to do it on Instagram, TikTok, WhatsApp. They don't want to go and find another phone number or email or whatever. And what we've got to think about is the people using these services. Times have changed. And so I do think that prioritizing people who can, being able to self-serve, will save a lot everywhere else, whether it's from booking a GP appointment. My GP is fantastic in that I can log on, do an e-consult, so fill in a form with what my problem is, and I get a text message back a few hours later to say whether the doctor wants to make me an appointment, or they've written a prescription that I can pick up, or go and talk to your pharmacist and leave us alone. But that interaction, it's asynchronous. I'm not hanging out on a phone line waiting to talk to someone directly. I'm getting the answer that I need directly. Yes, there's a few hours delay, but that's fine. Now, I know that online form doesn't work for everyone, but by me using it, it means that's one less person on the phone. So the people who do need to phone to make an appointment can. And I think that's the sort of model that we should be applying wider, is that by allowing people to self-serve where they can, because we expect to, we're in a Google age, we ask our smart speakers, to answer questions for us, even easier than looking it up. We expect answers at our fingertips. So let people self-serve who can do it. And that frees up the higher cost to serve things, your hand holding, your forms, your emails, your phone calls, for people who need that assistance, for more complex cases, for outliers. And I think that really works. But you've got to look at that with who your users are, who your citizens are. Because saw this survey from Combox last year that 61% of over 55s prefer to use a phone, compared to 34% of 16 to 24-year-olds. So that's a massive, 60% of your population over 55, they're going to choose to phone you instead. And in that younger age group, they're only going to phone you if they have to. And I have to admit, while I'm not in 16 to 24, though I wish I was, I'm loath to pick up a phone. If there is another way for me to contact someone, I will. And let's learn from that, because in the world of good data and chatbots and AI, you could actually be surfacing that information to that person in a handheld way through a chatbot in a way that leaves them happy, but at a really low cost to serve for your organization, without extra bums on seats, without extra systems, without extra, well, you probably need a system for the chatbot, but without additional strain on your workforce. You could be improving that journey and just making it easier for everyone.
And I suppose it's also, as you said, by them going through that channel, those people that need to, because maybe it's a complex query that is never going to be automated because it needs more of a human touch to navigate, or those who desire to use the phone because that's of the sort of generational communication preferences, enable that to do that, but be respectful rather than pushing everyone down a particular route.
And I think that's, as you just said, pushing everyone down a particular route, that is the key thing to avoid. It is all about, I've heard it said omni-channel, buzzwordy, but it's about meeting people where they are, or the communication needs of people can get the information they need in the way that they need it. So whether it is WhatsApp, phone, email, whatever. But yeah, it is about avoiding pushing everyone down a single route to make that journey easier for them.
Yeah. I remember doing some work, probably 10 years ago with a government agency, and they were digitizing. They wanted to get rid of the phone line because it was expensive. And then they looked at the demographics, and I think most of their users, because it was a government to industry thing, were predominantly, like say, 50 plus. And they didn't want to use a chatbot. They'd used the phone for 30 years. They wanted to keep on using it. So there were some challenges there about how do you nudge things. But if we go back to then just think about user needs. So if you've got a service that you say you don't particularly necessarily want to use, but you need to use it, discovering what is the user's true needs and discovering what is the best user journey for them to achieve that, I could imagine that's going to be more challenging, because if you're a business and you're working with, customers, business or consumers, it's normally quite easy to find people who are prepared to have a conversation with you and go through that process and experiment and learn, because there will always be a part of your customer base that happy to do that. But if you're doing something like you talked about, the immigration service, or some, other services like tax, I can imagine, or many other things, those people may not necessarily want to do it, let alone spend their time helping you make it better. So how do you overcome that? How do you get enough of the right involvement to know you're doing the right thing? Because you don't want to digitize a service that's not fit for purpose.
It is so challenging. And this is where you need real user researchers. You can't just, light touch, half-ass it. You've got to go really serious and do this properly, and especially work with vulnerable people. You're right. It's not people who are really excited to test out the new shampoo that's coming out or the new iPhone that's coming out or whatever, and they're lining up at the door to test it for you and give you feedback. It's not that at all. They probably don't want your service, which means they're not incentivized to come and talk to you, or they really hate your service. They really want to groan at you about it. It comes back to that emotions run high. Now, that there are many different ways to do it. Recruitment is tough, and I think it's all about going to where people are. So if it's something like immigration, go to the immigration centres. People are already there. How much shadowing could you do so you're not interrupting anyone's process and you're kind of letting processes happen as they normally would, and you're learning from that? Yeah. I think it's thinking about what are unobtrusive ways that you can get that information as much as possible, so that when you need to recruit users, you go to them with, we think we can make this better. Would you help us? Go to them with a prototype. Go to them with something to see, would this have been better for you? Yeah. Rather than putting the onus on them to tell you how to improve the service. Do the work for yourself. As in, first of all, what are your demographics? That's a really good starting point of who is it you are helping? What are the demographics of people you're helping? And from that, look at industry benchmarks. And yes, it's a generalization. I know it's generalization, but it's a starting point of, if you say, okay, well, actually, most people helping are over 60, then full-on digitization, chatbot only probably isn't going to be the best course of action. So start with your thinking, look at industry benchmarks from outside of public sector services against demographics. Think about who these people are and think about that person holistically. I think creating personas is a really useful exercise in public services, particularly. I mean, it's useful everywhere, but for that reason, it's thinking about, okay, this person's applying for a school place for their first child. They are new to the area. They don't know any other schools. They don't have anyone they could ask that, versus mum finding a school place for her fourth child, knows exactly what she wants, knows which school they're going to go to, big support networks. Those are two very different users.
Indeed.
They're both trying to do the same thing. They might be the same demographic. They might both be, 35-year-old females, similar income, similar social economic backgrounds, trying to do the same thing. But those use cases are very different.
Indeed.
So I think developing real personas to test your kind of thinking around those user needs is so important for that. And getting raw data where you can. So I always love starting with data as a business analyst. I get a bit nerdy about it. I want to see volumes of transactions. I want to see how long transactions are taking. I want to see if I can preempt where I think the bugbear is going to be, so that when I can get an opportunity to shadow or something, I'm looking for it. Similarly, if I then get in a position that actually we've got these 5 people have agreed to be interviewed by you, amazing, gold mine, but treat it respectfully and be respectful of their time. Say that they're not getting a massive reward for helping you. If you can incentivize, there are some government departments that are able to offer vouchers in return for user research, which is great. But be respectful of the time and go in with certain things you want to investigate. If it is, I think this is the knotty area, so I'm going to focus on that, rather than the kind of blank slate user research you get to do on something a bit more exciting. Something somebody wants.
Yes.
Like new smartphone, new TV, whatever, something really exciting. If it's, how can I make this less painful for you? And I think that has to be your starting point as well. It's, how do I make this less painful? It's not, how do I give you everything you want? It's, I know this is not an ideal situation. Don't pretend you've got it right and they're doing it wrong, because you haven't.
Yeah.
It's not going well. And I think it's the attitude of the person doing that user research, looking at the user needs, is your starting point has to be, this isn't an ideal situation. So what is the pain? What is causing that pain? And a lot of the time it is that build-up. It started off this morning. I thought I'll just look up the answer quickly on the website, and I couldn't find it. So I then had to find some more time and do some searching. I still couldn't find it. So I tried your online chat and I got nothing. And then I had to pick up the phone. So actually, my issue isn't the phone call. And my issue isn't the call agent not being able to find the answer. My issue is I've spent all day trying to get an answer.
Yeah.
And that final hurdle is what's floored me and annoyed me. So it's thinking about those personas, thinking about the journeys leading up to and after your service as well. You've got to think about them as real people on a real journey, and what's coming before and after your service. You're one chink in the armor. So things like applying for benefits. People generally don't go, yes, I'm going to apply for benefits. I can't wait to renew my universal tax credit. It's, damn, I'm in this situation. I need the help, and I need to know when that money's coming in, so I know if I can pay this bill, and I know if I go food shopping today or if I need to wait until Tuesday. And, that's the real journey. The journey isn't them filling in the form and getting money into their bank account. That's the system.
Yeah, that's just a means to an end. Yeah.
Their journey is how have they got there? How have they realized they need it? What's going on for them?
So I suppose hearing what you talk about, it sounds like it's that focus on what is the outcome that they're trying to achieve, and be mindful of that journey. Like say, is that means to an end. You mentioned personas, which I love, but I know particularly in public sector there are some I've read before people criticizing them because some and maybe this is days gone by, but some organizations crafting them and being the sort of I guess more proto personas. We've made them up. We've not talked to users. This is what we think. How do you, when you're creating personas to help you and the teams improve the service, make sure that they're, I guess, true and mindful that and you mentioned data a lot. So you've already got lots of data about your customers, your users. How do you make sure that personas are, say, valid and you can actually make them as realistic as possible?
Well, the easy answer is base it on a real person. You've probably got case studies in your organization, whether it's a formal case study that's written up and presented nicely, or whether it's, remember that incident we had last week where that person phoned and, people have a memory in your organization of individuals they've helped. And basing it on a real person is the easiest way to get real personas, to be crude about it. And then it's making sure you've got enough representation of different demographics, graphics and access needs. But there will be either, do you record calls in your service center? Could you listen back to some of those and build a persona out of that? Or your frontline staff who are helping their users use the service every day. Frontline people are the best to help you build those real personas. Because those of us that work in the tech, in the back office, we don't have that same interaction. They're the ones that get that full story, even better if it's on a personal basis. It's like, I saw them come in last week with their granddaughter, and they told me all about this holiday they're planning, and blah, blah, blah. That social aspect. Or find people who mirror that sort of person you're looking for. It won't always be possible, but ultimately the way to make them real is to base them on real people.
Right. Okay. So I just think if we are thinking about, we talked a lot about, some of the challenges, ways to overcome those things. If we think about how do we know that we've been successful? How do you measure success of, we've done this activity, we've made an improvement, but how do we know we've, rather than just the warm fuzzy feeling you get inside, what sort of measures do you put in place? Because in business, nice and easy, sales have gone up, customer satisfaction, but those services customer satisfaction may not be so relevant or maybe tinged with those negative emotions because people have been forced. So I'm interested to know what sort of measurements might be effective here.
Sort of depends on what it is and what you're doing. You can still look at things like customer satisfaction. A lot of websites, government websites as well, say like, how easy did you find that on a scale of smiley faces? And I think oftentimes you actually need to look at the negative feedback going down as much as you need to look at the positive feedback going up. Because that thing of people are much more likely to tell you if they're unhappy about it. So you've got to really look at everything you've got. So yeah, negative feedback going down. And I think reduction in contacts. So if you've got fewer people phoning up with issues, and this is going back to my theory that self-serve is king. If people are successfully self-serving, they're not contacting you. So if you've got an increasing number or a steady number of services being delivered or transactions being completed, and the volume of calls and contacts has gone down in relation to that, I think that's a win. Or if things like, again, it kind of depends what it is, but maybe it's the volume of calls has gone down, but the length of call has gone up, which will show you that it's a more complex query being answered. It's not a quick win because they found the information they need. So things like that. You can then also look at your web analytics to see, are people getting to the right pages in the right time? And in fact, that's the best way to design a good self-serve journey, is looking at your web analytics, check your bounce rate, check your average time on page, check the journeys and the referral, like how are they finding it? Are people coming through SEO? Is it direct referral? All those sorts of things. So you can't rely on one measure. And it, again, depends on your thing. Like I'm working at the Money and Pension Service, independent provider of free advice on all things money and pensions. And we want to help as many people as possible. So our measure of success is in line with helping more and more people. And it's a public service and publicly funded. But there are other things like passports, like court system, the criminal court. You're not going to measure success on how many people you've got through the system because there's just more at play than that. It's a bit more complicated. So it does depend what it is. But I think it comes down to time of transaction. If you think about if it's an online form, like filing your tax return, how long did it take the person how long were they on your page doing it? That sort of thing. So really complex, really vague answer for you. It depends what you're measuring, but I would say where you've got things like CSAT and NPS available to you, great. A lot of places do follow up with surveys as well. So go and say you recently completed your tax return, you recently created an account with your council. Can we send you a survey for feedback? Feedback rates on those generally isn't high, but it's something. And again, you've got to account for the bias of people with strong feelings fill in feedback forms, fill in surveys. You don't generally capture those people that are like, yeah, it's fine. But I think that's where we're seeing on government services websites more and more, them flashing up the quick out of 5 stars, out of 5 smiley faces, how do you rate it? To try and get some of that metric of customer satisfaction and ease.
And I guess in that instance, while it's not terribly deep and specific, it's probably the best you're going to get in the situation. Like say when people are like, well, I had to do it. So, it's hard to be too effervescent and gushing about applying for passports.
And you can even look at then things like staff turnover, as I mentioned earlier, like 8 out of 10 customer service agents leave within a year. That actually do you have higher employee satisfaction and your employee needs as well. Are people happier in their jobs? Do you have less turnover? Is it easier to recruit? Those sorts of things. So there's lots of metrics you could be looking at to build a full picture. And I think that's another thing I find interesting about public sector is you've got to get a bit creative with how you do these things and how you measure some of these outcomes and KPIs. As you say, in the private sector, it's much easier. You've got sales, you've got volumes. It's all about that. It's all about market share, which you can measure. There isn't really a market share of passports. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, this has been really interesting. Thank you, Helen. I've really enjoyed it. I suppose I can see some analogies in a business context to maybe some of the internal systems, because we've talked around how it is easier when you're talking directly to your customer. But I guess some of these practices on internal processes, so, HR processes, finance processes, the compliance stuff, the things that, often described are tax on people's life in a corporate world, the things that you've articulated, I could see being equally applicable in that space as well. When it's monopolistic in nature, and that way you have to fill in this form for us to get a holiday, etc.
I think in today's world where it's more competitive than ever, like whether you're booking a holiday, applying for opening a bank account, buying a car, whatever, there are thousands of options online. And if I can't do what I want to do quickly, I'm just going to find someone else who can. I think brand loyalty feels like it's quite low these days. People don't go back to the same brand as such if another brand can do it quicker and easier. So that goes to those same principles of being able to self-serve, meeting those user needs as quickly and easily as you can with a streamlined process, or they will find someone who can do it easier for them.
Well, there you go. There's a sobering closing thought for us. Thank you very much for your time today, Helen.
Thanks, Glenn. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know I've had fun making it. I'd be thrilled to hear your feedback or suggestions for topics you'd like me to explore. Email the show at podcast@nimbility.co. You can also check out all the other episodes in the series at nimbility.co/podcast. If you've enjoyed the content, it would mean a lot to us if you could subscribe and rate the show in your podcast app. Your support helps others discover the show and allows us to keep spreading the word. So until next time, thanks for listening.